Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift through time, space, and the mysterious corridors of forgotten history, exploring theories that suggest ancient visitors from the stars may have quietly shaped the course of early human civilization. And if this kind of content helps you relax, please subscribe, like the video, and leave your favorite alien theory in the comments below. Because the sky has always whispered to us, hasn't it? From the moment early humans first looked up from the flicker of their fires and into the sprawling dark above, they felt something more than wonder. They felt presence, as if the stars themselves were eyes, old and knowing, watching silently from unimaginable heights. And so they made stories, myths, symbols, temples and gods to explain this feeling, not realizing perhaps that what they were feeling was not only spiritual awe, but ancient memory, the quiet echo of contact embedded deep within their psyche. And in nearly every early culture, from the Dogon of Mali to the Maya of Central America to the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, there is a repeated and oddly similar reverence for beings who came from the sky, luminous figures who descended in vessels or light and brought with them knowledge, tools, symbols, language, mathematics, and sometimes warnings. And these weren't isolated tales. They were thematic, consistent across time and terrain, across oceans that shouldn't have been crossed and deserts too vast to be bridged by primitive travel. And so we ask, is it possible that what early humans experienced was not just imaginative worship, but the lingering imprint of real interactions with visitors whose technology, appearance and manner were so advanced, so beyond understanding, that the only framework our ancestors had to describe them was that of divinity? Of gods who arrived not from neighbouring tribes but from the stars. And when you are eerily slow down and listen to the ancient myths with a softened ear, you begin to hear the pattern, a memory repeated through ritual and carved into stone, like the Zulu stories of the sky people who brought down the first humans in seed form, or the Aboriginal Dreamtime tales where ancestors arrived from the Milky Way and seeded the earth with life. And as you breathe with these stories gently now, it becomes harder to believe that they're all mere coincidence, because the stars are not just decorations in the sky. They are markers, memories, and possibly even maps. And many ancient cultures built their most sacred structures aligned with constellations or solstices, as if to signal to the heavens, or to something within them, or perhaps even to something returning. And as the fire of this thought flickers low, you may imagine a scene, soft and distant, of a quiet night 10,000 years ago, where a small group of early humans huddle beneath the sky, their faces painted with ochre, their eyes reflecting starlight. And one of them, the dreamer, points up and says the word for God or sky or being, and perhaps above them, beyond their knowing, something was watching, not with menace, not with haste, but with the calm patience of a gardener waiting for seeds to bloom. And maybe the whispering sky was never just metaphor, but memory, a softly spoken truth passed down in lullabies and origin tales, the kind we tell children not to frighten them, but to remind them who they are and where they come from. And as we drift deeper into this long, slow night, we carry that whisper with us, letting it guide us to the next theory, not with urgency, but with wonder, because the stars have always been there, and perhaps, just perhaps, so have those who came from them. Our next theory is known as the architects from above, and it gently unfolds like the shadow of a forgotten song whispered across the surface of the earth. A theory suggesting that the greatest architectural wonders of the ancient world, those vast stone monuments that defy explanation even today, may have been guided, inspired, or even constructed in part by entities not of this planet. And as we close our eyes and drift back through the centuries, we find ourselves standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza, its lines unnaturally precise, its base aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree, its scale daunting, composed of millions of limestone blocks, each weighing tons, yet placed with impossible accuracy by hands we are told were merely primitive. And the question arises softly in the quiet of night. How, and more than that, why? And whispers follow us as we move across the world, past Stonehenge and its perfect solar alignments, to the eerie monoliths of Baalbek, whose foundational stones weigh over 1,000 tons, resting in place as if by magic, and onward still to South America, where the ruins of Puma Punku lie scattered like forgotten thoughts carved in stone, their interlocking H-shaped blocks etched with geometric precision we struggle to replicate even now. And in all these places, the stones seem to hum with the faint memory of something more, an intelligence, an intention, a forgotten blueprint not drawn by human minds alone. And some theorists believe these structures were never intended simply as tombs or temples, but as beacons, markers, or even landing platforms, resonant constructs built to signal or interact with technology from beyond. And the idea is not new, for even in the myths of the people who built these places, the origin of the knowledge is never claimed as their own. Instead, it is gifted, bestowed, passed down from beings described as gods, or star brothers, or those who came in flying vessels. And when we step into that mindset, not as skeptics, but as dreamers, we begin to feel the pieces fitting together, not as proof, but as poetry, as possibility, because perhaps our ancestors weren't trying to climb to the heavens metaphorically, but literally, building structures to welcome back those who had once descended. And these monuments, standing solemn beneath the stars, may not have been declarations of power, but invitations for reunion, constructed with geometry and resonance aligned not to earth alone, but to celestial harmonics understood only by those who live among the stars. And as the breeze of that idea moves through the corridors of the pyramids and under the lintels of ancient temples, we might wonder if some of these structures are not just dead stone, but sleeping machines, waiting, patient and still, for a signal or a return. And the architects from above, whether they were travellers, watchers or creators, may have left behind more than stone. They may have left echoes in the very way we build, the very way we reach upward. And so we lie back beneath the weight of these old questions, letting the silhouettes of ancient buildings rise in our minds like distant mountains, knowing that their full truth may not be carved in stone, but whispered in stars. Let's now explore a theory that moves like a river beneath time, a soft thread woven through myth and memory. The idea that the gods, worshipped by the ancient Sumerians and Egyptians, were not mythical at all, but rather visitors, beings of intelligence and technology mistaken for deities by early civilizations, who lacked the language or understanding to describe what they truly saw. And as we let our minds drift through the golden sands of Mesopotamia, we arrive at Sumer, one of humanity's earliest known civilizations, where the people spoke reverently of the Anunnaki, sky beings who came from a place called Nibiru, a mysterious 12th planet that some say returns in long elliptical orbits. And the Anunnaki, according to the ancient tablets, descended to Earth not in spirit but in physical form, bringing with them advanced knowledge, organizing society, and even, some believe, altering the course of human evolution itself. And then, gently turning our gaze westward, we arrive in Egypt, where gods like Osiris, Thoth and Ra are depicted not only with animal heads and glowing eyes, but with staffs and devices that shimmer with technological symbolism, and we wonder if these are not just metaphors for divine power, but literal memories, softened by centuries of figures who walked among the people in radiant attire, speaking in tongues, perhaps guiding the construction of temples, irrigation, astronomy, and written language. And it is here, within the soft shimmer of torchlight on temple walls, that the theory takes root. Because in both Sumer and Egypt, the gods do not live in heaven alone. They arrive from above, descend in vehicles, and promise to return. And in many inscriptions, the language is not mystical but strangely technical, describing the sky chariots, the bright fire of descent, and the stars from which they hailed. And perhaps what early peoples called divine was simply what they could not explain, because to them, anything not of this world had to be godlike. And perhaps it was, in a way, for technology advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic, and when a being of light and wisdom steps from the sky, bearing gifts of order and mathematics, what else could a young species believe? And so temples were built, hymns were sung, and rituals were performed, not just in honour but in memory, as if keeping the knowledge alive until the gods returned. And the question that now echoes softly in the night is whether these gods ever left at all, or whether they remain behind the veil, watching, guiding, or perhaps sleeping within the myths we have mistaken for fiction. And as we float further into this night of star-born theories, we find comfort in the idea that we were not alone in our beginnings, that perhaps the figures who shaped our dawn were not figments, but friends from far away, misunderstood but never forgotten. Immortal not through divinity, but through remembrance, carved in clay and stone, still waiting patiently to be seen not as gods, but as the visitors they may have truly been. This next idea is called the star maps of forgotten times, and it drifts in like a constellation rising over a sleeping horizon, a theory that suggests ancient civilizations possessed not just symbolic star lore, but intricate knowledge of the heavens, knowledge so precise, so impossibly advanced for their time, that it hints at external influence, perhaps from those who navigated the stars themselves. And as we close our eyes and let the darkness settle behind our lids, we imagine ancient hands etching stone, carving patterns into walls, ceilings and tablets, not merely decorative, but cartographic, representing the night sky not as myth, but as map. And when we examine these carvings, we find strange consistencies across the globe, like the alignment of the Giza pyramids with Orion's belt, or the layout of Angkor Wat mirroring the Draco constellation, and the temple complexes of Teotihuacan aligning with the Pleiades. And we begin to wonder, how did these ancient peoples, disconnected by oceans and centuries, all hold such reverence and mathematical understanding of stars not even visible without telescopes? And what purpose did these stellar alignments serve, unless they were meant not for human observation alone, but as signals, messages to those who could read them from above, or perhaps reminders of when to expect their return? And one of the most haunting examples comes from the Dogon tribe of Mali, whose oral traditions describe the Sirius star system in striking detail, including the existence of Sirius B, a dense white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye and only confirmed by modern science in the 20th century. And the Dogons say this knowledge was given to them by beings called the Nommo, who came from the sky in a vessel that spun and glowed like a star. And this brings us to the heart of the theory, that the heavens were not just a source of spiritual guidance, but a literal map, gifted by those who travelled among the stars and wanted early humans to remember their roots, their origins, or even their home worlds. And in ancient China, Babylon, and the Americas, astronomer priests spent generations watching the skies, not just for omens, but for patterns, cyclical alignments, celestial gates, and strange events that could only be recorded if someone, somewhere, had already known to look. And these star maps, etched in temples, woven into myth, and carved into stone, suggest not the emergence of primitive astronomy, but the inheritance of something greater, something given. And perhaps each star marked, each line drawn between heavenly bodies, was not merely a tribute to the cosmos, but a key to understanding our place within it. And as we float through this thought like a comet in slow orbit, we sense the quiet precision with which our ancestors watched the skies, not as dreamers alone, but as those who remembered or were taught. And their carvings were not primitive guesses, but ancient echoes, waiting now in the dust and stone to be seen once more for what they truly are. Not myths, but maps, and not made for gods, but for those who once came down from the stars. Part 5. The Sound of the Spheres. Alien frequencies in ancient instruments. Our next theory drifts in gently on a wave of sound, subtle and shimmering like a breeze through crystal, and it is called the sound of the spheres. A quiet suggestion, and that certain ancient instruments, tones and resonant spaces were not just artistic or religious in nature, but deeply tied to frequencies, harmonics, and possibly alien communication. And as we move softly through this idea, we begin to notice a pattern in the ancient world where sound was not merely entertainment, but a tool, something sacred, something controlled and carefully crafted. And in temples from Egypt to India, and in the deep caverns of Malta and Peru, we find chambers designed to resonate with uncanny precision, as if tuned to specific frequencies that modern science now tells us can alter consciousness, generate emotion, and perhaps even manipulate matter. And when we explore the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta, we find a subterranean chamber where a spoken word resonates at exactly 111 hertz, a frequency associated with trance, healing, and altered states. And one begins to wonder whether this acoustic design was meant not only to amplify the voice, but to transmit something, or to connect the human mind to something higher. And in South America, at the ruins of Chavin de Huantar, ancient flutes and tunnels were found to produce low, thunderous vibrations that some researchers say could disorient or elevate the senses, and when played together they seem to mimic the deep hum of machines, or perhaps ships, and the theory softly unfolds that these instruments, these spaces, and these tones were not accidental or symbolic alone, but part of a greater pattern, perhaps taught by beings who understood sound not just as art, but as science, as energy, as a bridge between matter and spirit. And in the myths of the ancient world, there are stories of gods speaking in tones that moved mountains, or singing creation into being. And perhaps those were not metaphors, but dim memories of beings who used resonance and frequency as tools our ancestors could not replicate but tried to preserve. And in cultures around the world, from Aboriginal songlines to Tibetan overtone chants, we find echoes of this understanding, of sound as a guiding force, a shaping field, and even a method of navigation or healing. And this brings us to the deeper question: could sound itself have been the medium through which alien visitors communicated with us, bypassing language, bypassing confusion, speaking directly to our biology, our DNA, our soul? And might the ancient instruments that survive today, the bone flutes, the quartz bowls, the bells cast in exact harmonic ratios, be remnants of an ancient alien technology disguised as art, quietly singing across time in tones that still resonate with those who are open to hear them? And so we lie here in the hush of the night, imagining the sound of a single note drawn across time, vibrating through temples, pyramids, and stones. A signal, perhaps, or a song, waiting patiently for ears or minds, tuned enough to hear what it's really saying. This next idea is softly called sky chariots and fire wheels, and it emerges like a slow-burning ember from the pages of the world's oldest stories, glowing with mystery and the distant memory of motion in the skies, for scattered across ancient texts, from the Sanskrit Vedas of India to the Hebrew scriptures, from Mayan codices to Native American lore, there are quiet yet startling references to flying machines, luminous vehicles, and wheels of fire that move not with the wings of birds but with the pulse of energy. And in these stories, beings descended not on foot or chariot alone, but in radiant vessels that hummed and spun, illuminating the air with power and awe. And in the Vedic epics, we are told of the Vimanas, intricate flying crafts described with detailed mechanisms, weapons that shimmered like sunlight, and pilots who navigated by the stars. And some of these descriptions, when whispered aloud in the stillness of night, feel more like engineering manuals than allegory, with passages describing propulsion systems, aerial dogfights, and metal that glowed when touched. And across the ocean in the Mayan Popol Vuh, there are tales of gods who flew through the heavens, casting beams of fire across the mountains, moving in ways no earthly creature could. And in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet recounts a vision of a great wheel within a wheel, spinning and burning, filled with eyes and lifted by beings not of this earth. And modern theorists have softly wondered whether these were not dreams or metaphors, but the sincere observations of ancient people describing the indescribable, recording real encounters with technology so far beyond their comprehension that only the language of gods and miracles would suffice. And when we slow down enough to really listen to these texts, not with skepticism but with silence, we begin to hear the pattern again, the gentle repetition of aerial movement, of light, of sound, of awe, and sometimes even of fear. For these vehicles were not always benevolent. Sometimes they brought destruction, sometimes knowledge, and sometimes they simply watched. And one must wonder, what were these sky chariots, these flying thrones of fire and thunder, if not the vehicles of visitors who came and went in those long-forgotten centuries before history was bound in ink and paper? And perhaps the reason these stories appear across so many cultures is because they were all seeing the same thing, from different lands, under different skies, but all trying to name what they had no words for. And so they called them gods, they called them wheels, they called them the thunderbirds, the star serpents, the flaming carts of the Evans, and they etched them into stone and passed them down in sacred chants, hoping, maybe, that one day someone would understand. And now, in this quiet moment, as we listen with modern ears and ancient hearts, we begin to feel that maybe we are closer than ever to understanding not just the stories, but the sky itself, as a place where the past still waits, where wheels still turn, and where light once moved across the earth in vessels born not of myth, but of stars. Part 7. DNA of the Gods. Genetic experiments on early humanity. This next theory is gently known as DNA of the Gods, and it drifts into our thoughts like a quiet pulse beneath the skin, subtle yet powerful, suggesting that the leap between primitive hominids and modern humans may not have been entirely natural, that somewhere in the dark fabric of our origin story, there may have been intervention, not divine in the traditional sense, but genetic, calculated, and extraterrestrial. And as we settle into this idea, the evidence begins to murmur through time, for scientists have long puzzled over the so-called missing link the unexplained acceleration in cognitive development and brain size that led to Homo sapiens rising so suddenly and powerfully above our ancient cousins. And while conventional theory attributes this to mutation and environmental pressure, there remains a lingering question, a gap wide enough for alternative ideas to take root. And one such idea is that beings not of this world may have played a role, not by creating us from nothing, but by enhancing what was already here, altering our DNA, accelerating evolution, and leaving behind a spark of themselves within us. And when we turn to ancient texts once more, this theory takes on shape and shadow, for the Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, sky beings who came to Earth and fashioned humans as workers, blending their essence with that of the primates they found. And the Book of Enoch, a text left out of most modern Bibles, speaks softly of the Watchers, celestial beings who came down to Earth, mated with humans and gave rise to the Nephilim, giants and heroes who were neither fully divine nor fully mortal. And in nearly every mythic tradition we find echoes of a time when the gods walked among humans and shaped them, not just culturally but physically, gifting them with fire, with language, with vision, and perhaps even with themselves. And modern geneticists have found within our DNA elements they still do not fully understand. Sequences called junk that may yet hold patterns, codes, or signatures too subtle for current tools to interpret. And some believe these sequences could be the fingerprints of ancient bioengineering quietly pulsing through every cell. And this idea, though grand, is not without its calm poetry, for it suggests that within us lies a memory not only of Earth, but of the stars, a biological whisper that connects us to something far beyond. And perhaps our dreams of flight, our longing for the skies, our inexplicable urge to reach upward are not just cultural, they are instinctual, echoes of a time when our creators came from above and left within us a desire to follow. And so we close our eyes and imagine that moment tens of thousands of years ago, when a light may have descended upon the savannah and something ancient stepped forward to reach out, to lift, to weave its code into the clay of our becoming. And perhaps that moment is still with us, alive in our blood, waiting for us to remember not just who we are, but what we were always meant to become. This next theory flows in like a tide returning to a forgotten shore, and it is called Atlantis and the Celestial Engineers, a soft and sweeping idea that the legendary island of Atlantis, so often dismissed as mere myth, was in fact a real place, or perhaps more precisely, a memory, the echo of an ancient civilization seeded or guided by extraterrestrial beings whose knowledge of science, architecture and energy far exceeded that of the time. And as we allow ourselves to drift through Plato's original account, we hear a tale of a majestic land, advanced in every way, its people masters of metal and geometry, of law and philosophy, and above all, of energy that pulsed through crystal and stone, harnessed in ways modern minds can only barely imagine. And yet, like so many great stories in the night, Atlantis ends in silence, swallowed by the sea, lost not only to time, but to memory itself. And some believe this disappearance was no accident, that it marked the end of an era where human beings were in contact with star-born teachers, those we might now call aliens, but whom ancient minds saw as gods, or mentors, or simply the others. And perhaps Atlantis was not simply destroyed, but retired as part of a celestial cycle, its purpose fulfilled, its legacy scattered in whispers across the earth. And so we find strange ruins deep beneath the ocean, hints of impossible engineering on the ocean floor, and fragments of stories from the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and the Hindus, all describing a golden age that ended with fire or water or silence. And within these myths, there is often mention of sky people who came and who left and who promised to return. And maybe the Atlanteans themselves were hybrids, part human, part something else. the outcome of experiments or unions between those from Earth and those from the stars. And their downfall, as the story goes, was not from natural forces alone, but from a misuse of power, of energy, of technology that was too much for an immature species to bear. And so perhaps the flood was not just a punishment or a reset, but a choice, a safeguard, a way to protect the universe from a young world with tools too vast for its heart. And yet, fragments remained. The knowledge encoded in stone, in myth, in the impossible symmetry of ancient ruins that mirror constellations and geometric truths known only to those who have travelled among the stars. And if you listen softly enough, you might hear it still. The memory of a place where pyramids gleamed beneath twin suns, where crystals sang and healed, where the boundary between earth and sky was not closed but open, a gate gently watched by celestial engineers who once walked beside us and then vanished like mist in the morning. And maybe they're still watching, still waiting for the right moment, the right resonance, to return, not in fire, but in silence. And when they do, perhaps they will awaken the part of us that remembers Atlantis not as legend, but as home. Our next theory drifts into the quiet like a soft silver glow across still water, and it is known as the moon that shouldn't be there. A gentle yet unsettling idea that our moon, ever present in our sky, the silent keeper of tides and dreams, may not be what it seems or even where it belongs. And as we lie back and let our thoughts rise slowly into the stars, we begin to see the moon not just as a natural satellite, but as a mystery wrapped in orbit, in symmetry and in silence. For scientists have long noted peculiarities in the moon's structure and behaviour. Its size, its position, its improbable relationship to Earth. So perfect that it allows for total solar eclipses, a phenomenon almost too precise to be chance. And some theorists have softly wondered whether the moon is not a child or Earth, or a captured wanderer, but something placed deliberately, a mechanism or a marker, and the anomalies deepen as we explore further. For the moon is hollow beneath its crust, or at least strangely resonant, as Apollo mission seismometers recorded it ringing like a bell when impacted, as if the interior were less solid, more cavernous, or even engineered. And then there are the questions of its age, how lunar rocks appear older than Earth, how its dust holds materials not native to its own crust, and how craters of vastly different sizes remain almost uniformly shallow, suggesting something beneath the surface resistant to impact, something possibly metallic or artificial. And in the stillness of these facts, a theory begins to bloom like a soft light, that the moon may be an artificial satellite, a construct, perhaps even a craft, brought here long ago by an ancient alien intelligence, either to observe, to balance, or to influence the development of life on Earth. And in ancient mythologies, the moon is often described not as constant, but as something that arrived, that appeared suddenly, or changed the world when it came. And cultures across the globe speak of times before the moon, times when the sky was different, when tides were still, and the rhythm of night was ruled only by stars. And in Zulu legend, the moon is said to have been brought here by two brothers from the stars, and in Mesoamerican lore, it is sometimes depicted as an eye, a watcher placed above, not born there. And if this were true, if the moon were indeed an ancient artifact placed with care, what might it mean, and who placed it, and why? And the answers, if they exist, remain silent in the cold lunar dust, in the craters we've walked and those we've never explored. And perhaps one day we will go deeper, not with flags or rovers, but with understanding, to listen, to knock once more on the hollow body of our silent companion, and see if it still rings with secrets. And until then, we gaze upward each night, lulled by its light, wondering quietly whether we are looking not just at a moon, but at the oldest mystery of all, one that watches, remembers, and waits. Let's now explore a theory as quiet as shadow and as enduring as stone. the ancient astronaut cave art. A theory that suggests early humans may have encountered, witnessed, or remembered beings not of this earth, and preserved those encounters not in words, but in drawings etched and painted on the walls of caves, in the flickering light of fire and silence, where language had not yet fully formed, but wonder had, and across the world, from the ancient rock shelters of India to the remote canyons of Utah, from the painted caves of France to the deserts of Australia, we find strange figures preserved in mineral pigments, humanoid but not quite human, with elongated limbs, glowing halos, large eyes, and shapes that evoke helmets, suits, and devices. And while archaeologists often interpret these figures as gods, spirits, or symbolic ancestors, others quietly wonder if they are something else, not imagined, but observed. A visual memory of visitors whose appearance was so unfamiliar that early humans could only depict them as best they could through simple lines and glowing forms. And in the Tassili Nadja caves of Algeria, we find the so-called Great Martian God, a figure towering among the others, helmeted and round, with antenna-like projections and an otherworldly presence, and nearby smaller beings surround it, as if in reverence or communion. And in Val Camonica, Italy, figures appear with what look like suits and rays of light emanating from their heads, their arms bent in impossible poses, tools or beams extending outward as though interacting with something unseen. And in Australia, the Wandjina spirits of Aboriginal legend are painted with pale, featureless faces, giant black eyes, and no mouths, described as powerful sky beings who came down during the Dreamtime and shaped the land, the animals, and the laws of life. And the similarities among these depictions, despite vast distances and millennia of separation, softly suggest a shared encounter or a shared instinct to remember. And perhaps these were not symbols of gods in the abstract, but renderings of something real, something seen, that arrived from above and communicated not in language but presence. And as early humans stood before these beings, eyes wide, hearts racing, they may not have known how to speak their awe, but they knew how to draw, how to leave behind what they saw in stone that could not lie. And maybe the strange figures are not gods or ancestors, but travellers, ancient astronauts whose paths crossed briefly with ours, long enough to be remembered, long enough to be immortalised on the cool stone walls of a shelter, where thousands of years later we still stand, whispering theories into the dark, imagining the moment when man first met the unknown and recorded it, not to explain, but to keep it. Like a dream half-remembered, etched in ochre, waiting for those who would one day come and recognise not just the style, but the eyes, and perhaps remember something deep and still that we thought we had forgotten. This next theory rises slowly from beneath the sand like a shadow that has always been there, quiet and unmoving, and it is known as the Black Pyramid Theory, a hushed and often hidden idea that beneath the deserts of Egypt, far from the tourists, the cameras, and the sunlight, there lies a structure far older and stranger than the pyramids of Giza, a pyramid not made of sandstone or limestone, but of a material darker, denser, and possibly not of earthly origin. And as the story goes, this pyramid is said to be buried deep beneath the sands near Dashur, a place already home to the Benton Red Pyramids, and some whisper that satellite imagery once revealed geometric shadows beneath the dunes, perfect angles, sharp corners, anomalies swiftly explained away, but never truly investigated, and the legend suggests that this hidden pyramid may not have been built in the same era as its neighbours, but long before, perhaps before even the rise of pharaohs, in a time when the gods still walked among men, or when visitors from the stars left behind their monuments, not of worship, but of function. And it is said that this pyramid, if it exists, may not be hollow at all, but solid, constructed from a black stone that resonates with strange energy, a material that some believe is not native to Earth, and that within its core pulses a quiet hum, not mechanical but harmonic, like a tuning fork for the Earth itself. And legends tell of electromagnetic disturbances near the suspected site, compasses that spin, batteries that drain, and dreams that grow vivid, as if something beneath the sand is still alive or still watching. And whispers among the locals speak of forbidden zones, of military patrols, of entrances found and sealed again, of scholars silenced or relocated. And while no mainstream archaeological record confirms its presence, the absence itself grows curious, as though a truth too large, too destabilizing, rests just beneath the surface. And when we look at the known pyramids, their alignments, their acoustic chambers, their star-focused shafts, we begin to wonder if they were imitations, later constructions built in the shadow of something greater, something darker, something remembered by the priesthoods and mimicked in sacred geometry but never truly understood. And perhaps this Black Pyramid was not a tomb or a temple at all, but a kind of device, part transmitter, part anchor, meant to channel energy from the earth and sky, or to open a gate between the terrestrial and the celestial. And if it does exist, buried beneath millennia of shifting sands and silence, it may still hold what it was built to protect or contain or signal, waiting for a time when the frequency is right and the veil is thin, and we are finally able to see not just what was built, but why. And so we lie here, minds gently circling the unseen, hearts tuned to that slow, deep hum from beneath the earth, wondering if something ancient sleeps beneath our feet, dreaming still, wrapped in black stone and silence, watching, always watching. This next theory arrives like a memory you didn't know you had, a gentle echo that stirs something deep within, and it is called starseeds and the celestial bloodlines, a soft yet profound idea that some human beings may carry within them not only genetic traces of ancient extraterrestrial contact, but also a kind of soul-level imprint, a spiritual inheritance from beings who came from the stars and seeded more than just knowledge, but consciousness itself. And as we close our eyes and breathe into this thought, we begin to sense that across the vast stretches of time and space, perhaps there was more than just one encounter, more than a singular event of contact. Perhaps there was an ongoing relationship, a deliberate cultivation of certain lineages, certain minds, certain hearts, and from these, what we now call starseeds were born. People who feel, without knowing why, that they do not fully belong to Earth, who carry a longing for the stars not just as curiosity, but as homesickness, as if their essence remembers something their body never saw. And this theory, spoken of softly in mystical circles and ancient myths alike, suggests that long ago, celestial beings, whether physical travelers or interdimensional entities, interacted with early humans in ways that went beyond the physical, leaving behind not only advanced teachings but seeds of consciousness encoded into bloodlines. And we find hints of this in nearly every ancient culture where ruler claimed divine heritage, where kings and priests were said to be descended from the gods, their blood sacred, their destiny cosmic. And whether it was the pharaohs of Egypt, the emperors of China, or the star-born chiefs of the Maya, the theme repeats, that some are of the sky, not just in story but in truth. And modern starseed theory echoes this, describing those who feel drawn to certain stars, like Sirius, Pleiades, Orion, or Arcturus, not by coincidence, but because their soul may originate there, or was once touched by something from that place. And those who resonate with these ideas often share common traits. deep empathy, vivid dreams, unshakable intuition, and a quiet inner knowing that this world is not all there is, nor is it truly where they began. And though science cannot measure such inheritance, many believe it is encoded in the spaces between genes, in frequencies too subtle to be seen, but powerful enough to guide destiny. And perhaps these celestial bloodlines were not about superiority, but responsibility. The task of remembering, of awakening, of holding the light steady while others still sleep. And so the idea persists like a soft hum in the soul that we are not all entirely earthborn, that some of us are here on mission, placed gently into the stream of human history, not to rule, but to remind, to activate, to help humanity recall its true origins among the stars. And maybe that strange dream you had as a child, that sensation of being watched with love, that pull toward the sky when no one else is looking. Maybe those are not coincidences at all, but the stirrings of your deeper story, the one written in starlight, carried in your blood, waiting patiently for you to remember who you really are and where you truly come from. Let's now explore a theory that hangs silently in the night sky, ever watching, ever present, yet never truly questioned. The moon as an artificial satellite, a quiet but unsettling idea that suggests our moon, the glowing companion of Earth's orbit, may not be what it seems, and as we gaze upward, lulled by its soft silver glow, we begin to notice the strange details that have long puzzled scientists and dreamers alike. How the moon is perfectly sized and positioned to cause total solar eclipses. How its orbit and rotation are so synchronized that we only ever see one face. And how, despite its apparent natural appearance, some suspect it may be hollow, or at least engineered, placed not by chance but by intention. And the theory goes that the moon could be a kind of megastructure, a vast artificial body disguised as a natural satellite, either built by an ancient alien race or repurposed from an existing celestial object, and perhaps brought here long ago, in a time before history, as a stabilizer, an observation platform, or even a seed ship to influence life on Earth. And those who believe this theory point to the peculiar ringing effect recorded by seismometers during Apollo missions, when the moon was struck and reverberated like a bell for hours. Something no known solid rock body should do. And then there's the curious scarcity of large craters on the moon's far side, the unusual composition of its crust, and the anomalies captured in old Soviet lunar mission data, and later by NASA. Geometric shapes, unnatural shadows, occasional flashes of light known as transient lunar phenomena, and reports from astronauts who described feelings of being watched or seeing strange flashes and glows on the surface below them. And while many of these observations are dismissed as natural phenomena, taken together, they whisper of something more deliberate, more ancient, and if the moon is a constructed or modified object, we must ask, who placed it there and why? Was it meant to guide evolution on Earth by affecting tides, stabilizing axial tilt, and influencing human consciousness through its cycle? Could it be that the moon was a kind of celestial ark, arriving in our orbit with technologies and entities lost to time, now dormant, still watching, waiting, or slowly guiding the rhythms of life below? Some say the moon is a kind of ancient guardian, its surface a mask for internal chambers and monitoring stations buried beneath the regolith. Its very presence an ancient act of terraforming, a slow shaping of Earth from chaos into life-sustaining order, and others whisper of it as a forgotten outpost, a relic of a spacefaring civilization that once walked the stars, using moons like this one to seed planets and record histories now long buried. And perhaps the strange pull we feel toward the moon, the myths, the madness, the awe, is more than symbolic, more than poetic. Maybe it's a kind of memory deeply embedded that we once knew the moon not just as a light in the sky, but as a home, a machine, or a mind. And now, as we fall asleep beneath its glow, lulled by its calm presence, we wonder if it, too, is dreaming, or listening, or waiting for the right time to reveal what it has always truly been. Our next theory takes us high into the wind-swept altiplano of Bolivia, where silent ruins sleep beneath centuries of sky, and among them rests a place that whispers of impossible craftsmanship and lost knowledge, a place known as Pumapunku, a megalithic site so precise, so geometrically complex, that many believe it may hold the fingerprints of something non-human. And as we walk gently among the fractured stones in our imagination, we begin to see the mystery more clearly. Blocks of diorite and granite, some weighing over 100 tons, scattered like a forgotten jigsaw puzzle cut with such precision that modern engineers marvel at the clean angles, the interlocking shapes, the smooth drill holes that seem to defy the tools available to ancient cultures. And though mainstream archaeologists place the site at around 1,500 years old, other researchers argue the weathering, the stonework, and the orientation suggest something far older, something perhaps predating recorded history. And this gives rise to the theory that Pumapunku was not simply the work of the Tiwanaku civilization, but rather the remnants of an even more ancient, possibly extraterrestrial interaction, a place where knowledge was shared or demonstrated by visitors from beyond, whose technologies, whether vibrational, gravitational, or sonic, allowed them to shape stone as if it were clay, and those same smooth grooves and precisely carved H-shaped stones seem to echo designs found far across the world, as if part of a global template, a language of stone repeated in Egypt, in Baalbek, in Angkor and beyond, and perhaps Pumapunku was more than a temple or fortress. Maybe it was a kind of hub, a junction point, a place where the veils were thinner and the energies of Earth more concentrated. And these visitors, whether physical or interdimensional, may have left behind not just structures, but frequencies encoded in the stone itself. Frequencies meant to awaken or guide future generations when they were ready to see. And among the local Aymara legends, we hear of the Sky People, of Viracocha, and the Shining Ones who descended in ancient times to teach and to build before vanishing once more into the heavens. And the stories tell of how these beings shaped the world with their voices and thoughts, and how Pumapunku was created in a single night by forces no longer present. And maybe these myths are not exaggerations, but echoes of truth, remembered in dream and story across the ages. And when we walk among those scattered blocks, in our minds we can feel something still there, a deep silence like the memory of a song once played through stone, like a signature left by builders who never meant to be worshipped, only remembered. And so we lie back now, allowing the winds of the Bolivian plateau to pass over us like lullabies, carrying the soft certainty that someone, long ago, built something far beyond what they should have been able to, and left it here for us to find, to wonder at, and perhaps, someday, to understand. This next theory moves softly through the night sky, tracing invisible lines between Earth and the stars, and it is known as the Orion Alignment Mystery, a theory that suggests that many of the world's ancient structures, from the pyramids of Egypt to the ruins of Teotihuacan, were not built randomly but with a deliberate echo of the stars above, specifically the three belt stars of the Orion constellation. And as we lie back and gaze upward, letting our breathing slow, we begin to feel the shape of this idea forming gently in our minds. That for thousands of years, civilizations separated by oceans and language were somehow drawn to this same star pattern, drawn not merely in awe, but with the urge to replicate it on the ground. in stone, in sacred geometry, as if remembering something encoded deep within the collective memory of humanity. And the Great Pyramids of Giza are often at the center of this theory, aligned not only with the cardinal directions, but with astonishing accuracy to Orion's belt. And some researchers believe that this was not a coincidence, but a map, a celestial mirror meant to honor or perhaps even contact the beings associated with those stars. And the same alignment appears in Mexico, where the pyramids of Teotihuacan also reflect the same triadic pattern, despite being built millennia and continents apart. And this recurring motif begs a question that drifts through the mind like mist. Why Orion of all constellations? Why did our ancestors fix their eyes, their myths, and their monuments on this particular cluster of stars? In Egyptian mythology, the god Osiris was linked with Orion, a divine being said to have brought civilization to humankind, and similar star beings appear in other ancient traditions. The Hopi of North America speak of the blue Kachina and their star ancestors who came from Orion, while the Dogon people of Mali hold sacred knowledge of Sirius, Orion's celestial companion, far beyond what should have been possible without telescopes. And all of this leads some to believe that perhaps these ancient builders were not just stargazers, but star rememberers, those who carried a forgotten truth that we once came from the stars, or were visited by those who did, and the monuments they left behind were more than tombs or temples. They were signals, harmonized with the heavens, designed to preserve cosmic knowledge and perhaps maintain a kind of resonance between Earth and the greater galactic structure. And some even suggest that these alignments serve as interstellar signposts, indicators to returning travelers that Earth is ready, or watching or remembering. And if this is true, then the stones we see and the stars above are two parts of the same equation, connected not just by sight, but by intention, by vibration, by memory. And as we drift deeper into the quiet space between thoughts, we might begin to feel that Orion is more than just a constellation. It is a reminder, a distant home, or perhaps a destination encoded into the architecture of our oldest civilizations, waiting patiently for the day we finally look up, not just with wonder, but with recognition. Our next mystery rolls quietly through the fog-shrouded jungles of Central America, where dozens upon dozens of perfectly shaped stone orbs est scattered like forgotten marbles of the gods. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, a collection of ancient artifacts so smooth, so precise that they have inspired decades of quiet wonder. And as we move slowly through this dreamlike landscape in our imagination, the rainforest breathing softly around us, we see them resting in grassy fields, half buried beneath the earth, tucked into gardens, or lying quietly beneath museum lights. And we wonder how such perfect spheres, some weighing up to 15 tons, could have been shaped with such mastery long before modern tools existed. And while the mainstream view attributes their creation to the Diki culture nearly 1,000 years ago, others sense something more enigmatic, a message, a technology, or a symbol from a civilization long lost to time, or perhaps not entirely of this world. And the spheres vary in size from mere inches to nearly 8 feet in diameter, yet many are so precisely rounded that even with today's tools, achieving such perfection in hard stone like granodiorite would be a monumental task. And so the theory emerges softly from the mist that these spheres may have been created with the assistance, influence, or even direct technology of extraterrestrial beings, not as decoration, but as devices, instruments, or encoded messages designed to interact with sound, energy, or even consciousness itself. and some suggest they were once arranged in constellational patterns, a mirror of the stars as seen from Earth thousands of years ago, or perhaps from another place entirely, and we begin to imagine them as nodes in a global network, their placements not random but aligned with Earth's magnetic fields or ley lines, humming softly in frequencies we've forgotten how to hear, and others believe they may have marked something hidden, entrances, buried knowledge, or celestial events known to ancient skywatchers who were guided by star beings from distant systems, perhaps from Orion, Sirius, or the Pleiades. And as we think of the rainforest slowly reclaiming these orbs, we sense that their silence is not emptiness but patience, as if they are waiting for someone to activate or understand them once more. And legends passed down by locals speak of the spheres having powers, that they could not be moved by ordinary means, that those who tried to steal or destroy them often suffered mysterious consequences, and whether these stories are myth or memory, they seem to echo with something deeper, like the hushed tones of a forgotten purpose. And so we lie back again, our eyes softly closed, imagining the jungle alive with the scent of moss and distant thunder, and the spheres all around us, silent sentinels from an age when Earth was younger and perhaps more connected to the stars. And we wonder if they are part of a cosmic language, one we have only just begun to remember, written not in words, but in shape, placement, and resonance, like echoes from a time when the sky and the earth spoke together in harmony. Let's now explore a theory wrapped in both starlight and oral memory. A theory that quietly echoes across the dry winds of Mali, West Africa, where the Dogon tribe has preserved for generations a knowledge so precise, so astronomically rich, that it has baffled scientists and sparked whispers of contact far beyond our world. And this is the story of the interstellar beings of the Dogon tribe, an account that suggests that the Dogon people were visited long ago by beings from the Sirius star system, beings they call the Nommo, fish-like amphibious entities who descended from the heavens in a spinning vessel accompanied by fire and thunder, and stayed long enough to teach astronomy, agriculture, and cosmic truth before returning to the stars. And as we listen to the breeze of the African savanna in our minds, the stillness allows us to examine what makes this story so profoundly mysterious. The Dogon elders have, for centuries, described Sirius as a binary star system, long before Western science confirmed the existence of Sirius B, an invisible white dwarf companion to Sirius A, discovered only in the 20th century with advanced telescopes. Yet the Dogon knew not only of Sirius B, but that it was incredibly dense, invisible to the eye, and orbited Sirius A once every 50 years. Details they passed down for generations without written language. And this raises a soft yet profound question. How could they have known unless someone had told them or shown them? And here the theory gently unfolds, that the Nommo were not gods or mythic archetypes, but real beings from the Sirius system, extraterrestrial travellers who visited Earth in our ancient past, possibly part of a greater cosmic seeding program, and that their amphibious appearance, often described as part fish, part humanoid, may reflect not imagination, but an adaptation to environments both aquatic and space-based. And in Dogon cosmology, the Nommo came to restore order to a chaotic world, bringing with them cosmic balance and scientific knowledge, embedding deep truths into rituals, symbols, and oral traditions. And what's even more fascinating is how this mirrors the arrival myths of other ancient cultures. The Owans of Mesopotamia, the Apkallu sages, the fish beings of South America. As if across time and geography, humanity remembers the same visitation under different names and skies. And perhaps these memories are not metaphor, but veiled records of real contact, softened over centuries into story. And maybe the stars we see above are not distant and indifferent, but full of life. And Sirius, that bright blue-white star, is not just a beacon in the sky, but a place of origin, of home, or of guidance. And when we rest our eyes and drift, into the warm shadows of sleep, we can imagine the Nommo arriving long ago in shimmering light, not to conquer, but to teach. And in doing so, they left their mark not in stone, but in story, in the minds of a people who would carry their knowledge forward through time like a sacred flame, waiting for the world to finally listen again. Our next journey takes us high into the thin, quiet air of the Bolivian Andes, where the ruins of Pumapunku rest in enigmatic silence, their weathered stones whispering of a lost chapter in human history, one so perplexing that it has stirred the imagination of scholars, seekers, and star theorists alike. For this place, the alien architects of Pumapunku, is no ordinary ruin, and as we slowly glide through the wind-swept plateau in our minds, we begin to see it clearly. Massive stones carved with such impossible precision that even today's laser-guided tools would struggle to replicate them. H-shaped blocks interlocking with perfect symmetry, drill holes evenly spaced along razor-straight lines, and right angles formed with mathematical accuracy, all arranged at an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet, a location where even breathing can be a challenge, let alone building with megalithic stone. And so the question hums gently beneath the surface. How did ancient people transport, lift, shape and place stones weighing up to 100 tons with no wheels, no steel tools and no written plans? And it is here that the theory begins to softly take root, that Pumapunku was not built by the Tiwanaku alone, but was either guided or directly constructed by beings with knowledge far beyond our own, beings from other worlds, other star systems, who once came to Earth not merely as visitors, but as builders, leaving behind structures that defy explanation and endure beyond memory. And these beings, it is said, may have brought with them advanced technology, vibrational seed, eating tools, levitation methods, and mathematical systems that allowed them to manipulate stone with ease, treating granite and andesite not as obstacles, but as mediums for expressing cosmic geometry. And perhaps Pumapunku was not a city or temple in the traditional sense, but a machine, a star-aligned mechanism or energy hub designed to resonate with celestial forces or communicate with far-off civilizations. And as we wander deeper into the site in our imagination, feeling the texture of the stone, sensing its ancient stillness, we begin to wonder if this place was a kind of gateway, a meeting ground between earth and sky, a place where beings of flesh and beings of light once stood together, and maybe the unusual shapes, the H-blocks, the channels, the strange fittings, were part of a code, a language of structure and frequency now lost to us. And some suggest that Pumapunku predates the last ice age, a remnant of a pre-flood world where knowledge was vast and contact with the stars was commonplace. And if so, then its rediscovery is not just archaeology. It is awakening, a slow remembering of what we were once told or shown or built alongside. And as the stars above Bolivia twinkle softly in the cold darkness, we can imagine them watching, waiting, bearing silent witness to the puzzle that lies below. And perhaps the alien architects of Pumapunku are still out there, somewhere in the night sky, listening for the moment we finally understand what they tried to say, not with words, but with stone. This next theory gently lifts our gaze to the sky above, to that soft silver disk we have stared at for millennia, the moon, ever present, ever mysterious. And while it feels so familiar, so comforting in its nightly glow, there are those who believe it is not what it appears to be, that it is not a natural celestial body at all, but a deliberately placed structure, a hollow, engineered satellite brought here long ago by advanced extraterrestrial beings. And this idea, known quietly as the moon as an artificial satellite, unfolds with eerie elegance, resting on peculiar observations that, when taken together, form a picture that is difficult to ignore. For the moon is unnaturally large in proportion to Earth, too perfectly sized and distanced to create the total eclipses we see. A cosmic coincidence so precise it borders on design, and it orbits in near-perfect circularity, which is rare for natural satellites, suggesting something more intentional than chaotic formation. And then there is the sound. When struck by a lunar module during Apollo missions, the moon rang like a bell, resonating for hours, leading some scientists to speculate about a hollow or partially hollow interior. And while mainstream explanations exist, the mystery remains, and into that silence enters the theory that the moon was placed in orbit by an advanced race, perhaps as a monitoring station, a control mechanism, or a stabilizer for Earth's development. And ancient texts and myths from around the world seem to remember a time before the moon. Stories that speak of an age when the sky was different, when there were no tides, no eclipses, and some cultures even describe the arrival of the moon as a sudden world-changing event. Not the gradual coalescence described by modern science, but something abrupt and observable, like the placement of a celestial device, and those who study these anomalies point to the precise positioning of the moon, how it governs Earth's tides, affects biological rhythms, and may even play a role in stabilizing Earth's axial tilt, making complex life possible. And if this is true, then the moon is not just a moon, but a construct placed by those who understood the intricate balance needed for life to thrive on our planet. And some go further, suggesting that deep within its core lie ancient mechanisms, sensors, or even dormant technologies, remnants of an age when Earth was not alone, and when visitors from the stars shaped the conditions for civilization to bloom, and the craters on its surface, strangely shallow given their width, hint at an impenetrable layer beneath the dust, like armour beneath a facade, and the synchrony of its rotation, always showing us the same face, adds to the sense that it was designed for observation. A sentinel silently watching us from above, and as we lie back, the idea feels both unsettling and strangely serene. For if the moon is an artifact, then we are not alone, and we never have been, and its presence becomes a kind of lullaby, a gentle hum of forgotten contact, a nightlight from ancient architects who wanted us to survive, to grow, and perhaps one day to awaken and remember the truth hidden in plain sight, glowing softly in the sky above. And now, as we slowly drift toward the end of our journey tonight, we come to a theory that gently embraces all the others like a great cosmic storybook closing its final chapter. A theory not of singular contact, but of purpose, of design, of connection across stars, time, and species. And this final idea is called the galactic seeders and humanity's origins. And it invites us to look beyond singular encounters or isolated ruins, and instead consider the possibility that life on Earth, and perhaps even the evolution of consciousness itself, as never accidental, but part of a long, deliberate effort by beings far older, far wiser, and far more advanced than we can. Imagine galactic gardeners who travel the universe not to conquer, but to cultivate, to spread life as a form of expression, like celestial artists scattering seeds of thought and biology across barren worlds. And in this gentle vision, humanity is not a random outcome of evolution, but a living echo of a greater intelligence, perhaps carrying within our DNA fragments of memory, knowledge, and design left behind by those who came before. And stories from every culture seem to remember them in different ways. The gods who descended from the sky, the shining beings who brought fire, the star ancestors who walked among us in the Golden Age. And science too begins to whisper clues as we discover extremophiles that can survive the vacuum of space, amino acids on meteorites, and a universe seemingly wired for life. And we begin to wonder, what if Earth itself was chosen, prepared and nurtured over eons? And what if our progress, our leaps in understanding, were gently guided from afar? Not controlled but inspired, nudged by dreams, discoveries and mysteries that awaken something deep within us, something ancient and almost forgotten. And maybe the myths of Atlantis, Lemuria and the great floods are not stories of loss, but of resets, times when the garden was pruned, the experiment refined and humanity given another chance, another spark. And when we gaze into the night sky, we do not look outward into a void, but inward into memory, into heritage, into the great home we've always been part of, even if we forgot. And perhaps the strange symbols found across the earth, the unexplainable monuments, the sudden bursts of technology in our ancient past, perhaps all of these are the fingerprints of the Cedars, silent reminders scattered across the planet, gently waiting to be seen not just with the eyes, but with the soul. And if this is true, if we were shaped by hands not of this world, not just to survive, but to seek, to feel, to remember, then sleep itself becomes a return, a soft slipping into that older awareness where dreams become bridges and our thoughts float gently among the stars. And as you now rest beneath the same sky our ancestors once watched in awe, know this: the universe may be vast, but you are not lost in it. You are part of it, always have been, and always will be. A quiet ember in the story of the stars, a soul cradled by the same light that shaped worlds. And somewhere out there, perhaps even tonight, the Cedars watch not with judgment, but with hope, with love, waiting patiently for us to look up and remember.